the life of a bail bondsman.
Out free on multiple felony bonds or PR bonds.
Nationwide movement for police and criminal justice reform.
For this bond issue, repeat violent offenders.
Bail talk, we talk bail. Bail talk, we talk bail. Bail talk, we talk bail. Bail City, Red Room, bail talk, we talk bail.
Welcome to Bail Talk. I'm your host, Carter Spencieri, bail bondsman at Bail City Bail Bonds in Greeley, Colorado. We have a really special episode that we're going to shoot today. I've been wanting to talk to Owen for a while about all the knowledge he has, and I think it's going to be a very interesting show. I'm here with my two co-hosts. I'll let them introduce themselves.
My name is Mike Taylor, TaylorMade Bail Bonding.
Alex Spencieri, Bail City Bail Bonds.
And Owen, I'll let you introduce yourself. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very much. My name is Wang. I go by Owen with these guys. I'm the partner of Britt Searing and Wang, currently an attorney. I like to call myself as a litigator, but prior to this, I was a prosecutor in a rural county in Colorado. Thank you for inviting me to the show.
Yeah, thanks for coming. We're
really
glad
fun.
we have you. Let's start from the beginning. What made you want to become an attorney?
You know, that's a very good question. At the very beginning, I suppose I just wanted to help people. And practicing law, you know, the whole concept of law, at least in a society like the United States, you know, that's the fundamental. That's the, you know, if you pull the rug off the box, that's what you see, the cogs, the laws functioning. I think if someone knows how to, you know, practice law and someone knows that well, you know, there's a lot of help that guy can provide to a lot of people. And I think ultimately, you know, in a society like ours, the best help one is going to be able to provide is, you know, those in the areas of law. And I think if I want to help someone, I don't just want to, you know, help someone half cooked. I want to do the whole thing. And you know, the best thing to do is to go to law school and become a lawyer for that.
Was there a certain type of law when you decided to go to school that you wanted to do more than another type of law, or?
You know, when I went through law school, of course, you know, I went to law school in Colorado University at Boulder, UC Boulder. They don't let you pick a specialty, at least not in the sense that if you go to undergrad, you pick a major. If you go to a doctorate, you pick a stuff you want to, you know, study. But the practice of law, at least in law school, they just, you know, it's called JD, Juris Doctor. It's just, it's the practice of law. But, you know, as you know, there's so many different ways of practicing law. You know, there's criminal defense, there's civil litigation, there's domestic relations, and there's a good number of governance as well. You know, if there's a reason why a lot of the government agents or officers or, you know, personnel of our state or federal government are lawyers. So going through law school, the question is, do I have a set of, you know, what I wanted to do? At the very beginning, I didn't. You know, law school is a 3-year event. The first year, you know, every one of us have the same set of classes, you know, the basics, constitutional law, criminal law, and what have you. So going through that, it's like learning and seeing it all, not really knowing what I was going to do. But, you know, I like reading. I like writing. I like, you know, talking with people. So I suppose for me, it was always about working with people. And that itself, it's a niche. Not, you know, a lot of lawyers don't work with people. They work with paper and transactions. And you know, that's a different area of practice than, for example, litigation.
Or like a water law. Like that's paper and pen, huh?
You know, I've never done water law.
Sounds boring, huh?
I have no idea.
I heard that it's pretty good money, though.
I'm sure you can find a very eccentric water law attorney. I'm sure you can find them up in somewhere.
But like, how boring is that? You know, talking about water rights and all sorts of crazy things like that.
You know, that's actually a very exciting area.
Really?
You'd be surprised. Water law is, you know, first and foremost, very political.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and many times involves the interest of a lot of folks, even sometimes states. You know, I came from Los Angeles. There was a movie called Chinatown. I don't know if you guys watched it. You know, the whole thing was about diverting water from the Owens Valley to Los Angeles, and the, you know, the underworkings of that film. It's quite something to watch.
So you grew up in Los Angeles?
Yeah, well, technically, I grew up in China, Shanghai, China. That's where I was born, and I spent a good chunk of my, when I was a little kid, that's where I was at. But ever since I was, attending education and high school, undergrad, that was in Los Angeles.
Is that when you wanted to become an attorney? Is when you were living over there, or was it like, hey, like I moved to Los Angeles, and you seen some guy in a flashy car, you're like, hey, I'm a lawyer, and you're like, hey, I want to do that. Like, what was your incentive?
I wish I can say that I saw somebody in a flashy car and said, hey, this is gonna give me a flashy car, but I think, and this might be awkward, but I really think that I went into this because my undergrad major was international relations, right? So that's like political science with a tad of diplomacy and negotiation and so on and so forth. And my minor, that's another thing you pick, was mathematical finance. So at that time, what I was also thinking is if I couldn't become a lawyer, I could become a diplomat.
Okay.
Of some sort. But then, I was naive back then. I was 20, 21, and I realized that I am too Chinese to be fully an American diplomat, right? And vice versa, I'm too American to be fully a Chinese diplomat. So I'm like the bat. I'm not an animal, I'm not a mammal, I'm not a bird either.
Yeah.
Right.
So and I was thinking at that time because I wanted to help folks. I wanted to help people how it matters as much as I can. I don't want to be, as I said, half cooking stuff. And if I'm just a handyman per se, or if I'm just an investment advisor or a consultant, I just always felt like there's something missing. If I'm, for example, consulting someone on a business, I just feel like there is a critical juncture of the actual help when it comes to the brick and mortar stuff that I cannot be helping with. So that sort of geared me towards thinking about becoming a lawyer, right? That compounded with when you go through poli-sci, international relations, political science, you have a natural affinity and tendency to works that requires a lot of reading, a lot of writing, and just so happens international relations, it's like negotiations, and that's a big part of a lawyer's life is negotiating. It just I think it just sort of shaped out to be the thing to do. And then, I took the LSAT. I did an okay score. I applied around, and CU was able to give me a decent scholarship. Have I told you how I found Colorado?
I was gonna just ask you that question. How did you get? What made you choose CU Boulder to go to school and?
It's definitely a good law school. It's a good law school.
It's a very good law school.
Coming from Los Angeles to Colorado, like you got snow up here, like Los Angeles is kind of the dream. But yeah, let's hear it.
All right, so I think it was the third year of my undergrad experience. I went to undergrad in University of Southern California, USC. It's in the heart of downtown Los Angeles. So I had this buddy at the time. His name is Tony, I think. Yeah, Tony. So he had this Mustang. You see, he had this Mustang. Okay. So I was telling him, hey, you have a Mustang. That's a very American car. Why don't we just keep driving and see how far it's gonna go? And we just kept driving, and then eventually we ended up in New York.
Okay.
From Los Angeles.
So how long was that?
Going there was a week. We went and when we stopped, and then we went and when we stopped, we found hotels on the road just to take a rest. And on the way back, I think we took the 40 up and 25 down. Yeah, don't correct me if I'm wrong. It was a while back. So we drove the continental United States. What struck me as the most magnificent and most beautiful state is Colorado. Because, prior to Colorado, you have beautiful Utah. Utah is beautiful, but for me, it's too dry. I don't see any greens. I see a very magnificent rocks.
Right.
That's cool and all. And then, you have Arizona, and then you have, Las Vegas. I like Vegas, by the way.
I think we all do at this table.
If I have to choose again, I might consider differently. But, you have Vegas, which at the time didn't seem like a place where someone lives.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, just where you're flying for the weekend, you're gone.
Right. So after Colorado, you have, the plains. and they all look the same, right? The big prairies, big grassland. They're fun. I still have very good friends in Kentucky, and they have a horse farm, and I go sometimes just to pet their horses. So it's fun. But for me, I like driving. I like the mountains. I like the scenery. It legitimately feels like you're going through Jurassic Park when you're entering Colorado, especially when you're leaving Grand Junction. And
Yes.
you're getting into White River National Park.
Yeah.
That struck me as very special. That's my. It's very movie-esque for me. So and I thought, why don't I just apply for a university here? And I did. And it turned out to be all considering a very good choice. And then my professional connections grew in the state, and I stayed. It was that simple. So it's a road trip that made me choose Colorado.
That's cool. That's cool. That's a really cool story.
Yeah.
So you're moving forward from there. You go to school at CU, and you get your grad. Now, you did some time as an internship over at the district attorney's office in Boulder, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I think it was my third year of law school. So if you don't have a license to practice law, if you don't pass the bar, of course they're not going to let you practice law. You can't go in front of the judge or represent anything, right?
Right.
But Colorado has this thing that's called a Student Practice Act that allows students, third-year students, law school students, to have the ability to practice like a full-fledged attorney, but with the supervision of a full-fledged attorney on the record in various courthouses. And I think that's a very good way for aspiring young attorney to start. So at the third year of my law school experience, I did work as a student attorney, extern, so to speak, at Boulder DA's office.
Now, you were in like a county court, or was it district, or were you a combination of both? Or
It was county. Off and on, there's district court projects where young attorneys can help with, but we're never. Of course, we're not the chief, right? Of course, we can really take on those cases. For me, I was mostly running dockets. I was mostly with the supervision of attorneys in that office. I was essentially, how if you get a traffic ticket, you go into the court and then you talk to someone, right?
hey, I got 4 points. Can you give me 2?
that.
We've
So-
been there.
so-
We've all been there.
Primarily, I was the guy that you're talking to on that.
And then you'd say, hey, well, let me check back, sit right here type deal.
Yeah, something like that, and just chat with the folks, see what's going on, see what the offers can be. Of course, making sure that he or she knows that they have the right to an attorney if they can hire when there's public defenders available. By the way, great attorneys, public defenders, they're wonderful attorneys. But yeah, I did that for a year. I had a trial too with the supervision of a actual attorney, but that was the experience.
Now, with Boulder, was it just that one trial that you had, or were you looking into other like violent misdemeanor crimes such as like a third-degree assault? Or were you dealing with any of the type of cases like that, or is it more just running the traffic docket, moving paper?
So, at the time, I don't know what Boulder is now, but at the time we had how court in Boulder was. It's on rotation. So every different division has a DA, and I think every week there's a different division. So I was following the county court docket. You and me both know that there's a variety of crimes that are all charged as county court. You have your, starting from, of course, your traffic tickets. Those are county court. But then you have your low-level violent offenses as well. Assault, third-degree assault, harassment, menace, you name it, right? And of course, you have you have your sex offenses as well. Unlawful sexual contact, public indecency, stuff like that are all charged as misdemeanors. So running a county court docket, or at least helping to run a county court docket, really, brings you to see all that. And Boulder is a very busy place, right? So day in and day out, we had a lot of exposures to hit the ground running, essentially, talking with the defendants, see if we can work out a deal. If not, work with the prosecutors to prosecute a case, sometimes writing motions, sometimes court appearances.
Did you see, so Boulder, from our experience within, now what was the years that you were there? Was that 2016, 2015?
2017 to 18, if memory serves me correct.
Okay, so during that time, we noticed as bail agents a downtick in surety bonds there. Did you see a lot of personal recognizance bonds, and did you see people showing up on those quite often, or was it like, hey, like 10%, 15% of our docket failed to appear? Or if you can jog your memory, like what do you remember? Like, was it like, hey, like this guy didn't show, this guy didn't show. Okay, we got one guy showing. Like, what would you, if you could give a percentage, what would that be like?
That was so long ago. So how we did it, I can tell you how we did it is, every morning we had a little, drawer. In that drawer, there's a stack of all the cases that's set for docket on that day, right? And we, of course, at the very beginning of the morning, we don't know if who's going to show or who won't show, right?
Yes, of course.
So we have the stack, and we just, we have people lined up outside. As you know, it's what we call a cattle call docket, right? That's what they call it.
Like a check-in, like who's here?
Like who's here, who's not here. So we pull a paper. I mean, usually there's me, another, external attorney, who at the time, I think it was Miss Kayla Wilderman or something. I think that was her name. Also a student attorney. We were, and then there's the supervising attorney. At my time, it was I think it's Miss Katrina Wiegel, who might still be there. Anyways, Jack Peters, those are the, supervising attorneys. What we do is we pull that sheet. We see the defendant's name. We see the charge. And we just go out there and we invite so and so to sit, right across me. And we just start chatting about, what's going on, what the processes are. You have a right to an attorney. So your question is, do I see an uptick of failure to appear or PR bonds?
Or just on any bond, sort of speak. So, like, did you have a lot of people just not showing, or was it for the most part?
You'd be surprised that people usually show. Mm-hmm. If I have a stack like this, usually I think I have 2-3 FTAs.
A day.
A day. Or at least not a day. In cases that I handle. Now, there's 3 of us, right? So I don't know what's going on with this person or that person. At least for myself, I can expect 3 to 4 cases that I'm not going to be able to get a person to the name, right? Mm-hmm. And, we usually put them at the, end of the stack. So if they show up late, that's totally fine. We can still talk to them, right? Yep. But, after we go through all the cases, and if they are still not here, then we go to the judge. We tell the judge, look, judge, these people didn't show. And usually at that time, I think the judge, at least the judges I was in front of, they usually issued warrants.
Monetary, or was it some sort of... Did you ever have a case where it's like, that doesn't make sense? Like he's failed to appear more times than he showed up, and there's still some sort of low bail or not? What you ever like scratch your head like, what was he thinking there?
So at the time when I was doing the student attorney bit, we're not running the docket. We're doing intake.
Oh, so like you didn't make it that far quite.
We didn't do docket. We didn't go in there and manage your docket box. That's 2 different things. We're at the initial intake to make sure that, if there's a case that can be stipulated out, we're going to do that. But I think what you're referring to is cases that's already ongoing.
Yeah. So you were just like straight up like, hey, you have a right to an attorney.
First appearance.
First appearance, exactly. I was at first appearance center. And then if I was able to reach a deal with the guy or the girl, we would have done that and closed the case. But running the docket, that's a different issue.
That was later in your career. We'll get there.
That's later, but first appearance center, if they don't show, that means they didn't show for their first appearance, which means most likely more than not a warrant.
Yeah.
And, it's the first, disappearance. So the warrant is just, that's normal. I don't see very high amounts being requested.
Bail City Bail Bonds, Colorado's premier bail bonds agency. Give us a call today, 970-378-7878.
Okay, so that was kind of neat when you were talking about Boulder and how you did an internship there. Did you have any sort of extracurricular activities while you were in school, still, within the legal field?
Yeah, so, Boulder DA's office was my third year. I think it was either my first or my second year. I actually externed for the summer, or did it extend beyond the summer? I forgot. That was a long time ago. I actually externed for the Court of Appeals here in Colorado. It was the building of the Supreme Court.
How was that?
That was actually very fun. That's the other aspect of practicing law, which is, the part that you don't really deal with a lot of people. What you do is write. You read case law, you read parties' briefs, and you write the memos for the justices and the judges to rule out.
That's cool.
That was fun.
Do you have any sort of cool ones that you remember doing, like, hey, this was super interesting, or?
You'd be surprised how many pro se people file their briefs into the Court of Appeals. A number of the cases I helped the judge with was actually working with pro se folks, and their briefs are very colorful.
Yeah. You gotta go crazy if you're going that level, especially pro se, So.
And I can't emphasize enough how important it is for an attorney to be very efficient with his words or her words on an appeals brief. When we see a well-written brief, we are genuinely convinced by the points made in those briefs, and many times that's the thing that's going to end up in the judge's order. I learned that on my second year of law school. I was lucky enough that I get to work with the judge on many of those decisions.
Owen, may I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, a pro se to a lawyer filing, do you think the judge takes the pro se as, do they take it as serious as they would a lawyer, knowing it's coming from a lawyer?
So
or a law firm?
they would have to. They have to treat the standard is to treat the pro se people under the same standard as lawyers. But that's a double-edged sword to the pro se folks too, right? Because what pro se folks usually get is the facts. They get the facts right, and in fact, I think, elaborate on the facts, and they usually tell a much better story than the lawyers, because lawyers, it's secondhand information. But for the pro se people, it's their first-hand information. They're usually emotional about it, so they tell the story very well. However, they usually miss on the points of law and what's relevant pursuant to the practice of law. You can argue A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but perhaps B through G are irrelevant. Whoever's reading it is just going to grow tired of reading it. It's extra work for a clerk or a judge to parse out what's relevant from what's irrelevant. And I personally, when I was helping the judge on these, I personally find case law more convincing than fact. And if you can apply facts neatly to the case law, I think that's a very strong brief.
Okay, yeah, because the reason why I was asking you is I had filed a motion in Louisville.
Yeah, Louisville. Is that Louisville, Colorado, or Louisville,
the
Kentucky?
municipal.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was surprised because when I filed it, it was just a simple exoneration.
Yeah.
But there was context to it. There was context to it, and I was hauled into court. I was subpoenaed into court.
Oh, yeah.
Because the judge had me show up before docket started to explain my motion because he didn't believe I wrote it.
Oh, yeah. Well, good for you. Good for you.
But I was trying to get at it was I thought I was getting in trouble because I didn't know why I was there. And when he asked me to explain the case laws to him, and when I was able to,
that's a good pro se party.
So that's why I was always under the impression then maybe I should start hiring a lawyer to file my motions so this don't happen.
Lawyers look at cases differently from lay people, right? We've been trained through law school to look at things at what's the issue here.
The logical standard.
Yeah, what's the issue? What's the rules? What does the case law say? How do I tie the fact up to the case law? And during all that, how do I make a strong narrative, right? I think one of the fundamentals of writing a good motion or even any good pleading is to support a narrative. Tell your story, but don't go off on a tangent telling the world about everything. Stick to the points that matters legally, but tell a thorough story. Is my experience says that is a good way of pleading.
When writing a motion, for exoneration or whatever, I mean, you can't tell the whole story because, I mean, at a certain point, it's like a 6-page motion. That's a little extent for what you're trying to do. But painting a picture for some of these complex motions is actually, I think, a little bit more useful than, like, okay, here's the law. This is why. That's it. You know, like, just a little bit. It has to be like that sweet spot. You know,
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say.
So I think if you're philosophical about it, what is the practice of law? It's essentially discourse. Discourse from both parties with a arbiter who's trying to decide what should happen, right? So, the human beings are moved by reason, by law, by emotions, by whatever, right?
And then at the end of the day, that's the arbitrator.
Right. So I think it's it's a story about what happened, right? First and foremost, you got to be able to tell the story thoroughly. But I think the thing that lawyers have an edge over the lay folk is that they know the precedents, they know the law, they know how to apply what happened to the laws, and the judge will feel comfortable relying on points of law, right? And if a lawyer is able to put a more narrative about the human emotional side without belaboring the court, but still applying the right legal standard, I think that's a much stronger pleading.
So what I was noticing was statutes are cut and dry. They're black and white. But case law, there's case laws out there that are so similar, but it's slightly different. You can have them so close together that one could apply in the situation, not the other, but they're almost identical.
I'd say if you're getting that deep, you should talk to a lawyer. Seriously, because that's when you're getting to where you need to parse out the case differences in case law. That really goes very deep into legal argument, and I think that's what a lawyer is trained for. Yeah.
Well, and a lawyer's, it's the show at the end of the day too. So if this were to go in front of a judge, you need someone that does this every day, right?
And the other term for a lawyer is the advocate, right?
Sure.
I'm advocating on someone's behalf, and the tools of that advocating is case law and statutes for the lawyer, while I'm telling a compelling human story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ken, for the people that don't understand what we were just talking about, can you explain the difference between a statute and a case law?
Oh, statute is legislation. It's essentially the law, black letter law. It's what the law book says. It's what, for example, this is illegal, that is illegal. But case law is the precedence of how judges ruled on different points of law. So a statute can be one line, but the case law can be as much as there is.
The story.
Yeah,
The story.
so to speak.
All right, Carter, you want to ask Owen about the 13th?
Yeah, so you finish up with that, and then what made you decide that the next step was going to be becoming a prosecutor and going over to that area?
Okay, so, the last year of my law school, as we were talking about, I was externing in the Boulder DA's office. So the natural progression, what every law student do at that time is to try to see if they can or cannot apply for a DA's office, right? So for me, this goes all the way back to my naive belief of, and I still believe in that, I'm here to help people. I'm an able-handed guy, I'm trying to do the best I can, helping people who needed help. So at that time, when I was in the Boulder DA's office, I was talking with I think her name was Rose, first name. I was talking with her. She's a victim advocate. And we were going over, the landscape of prosecution and offices, the differences. And she was telling me how rural counties sort of needed help. They needed attorneys. They needed good personnel. They needed all the help they could get, right? So, I thought to myself, hey, they need the help, and I'm here to try to help. So why don't I apply for a rural prosecution job? Just so happens at the time, there was this rural prosecution fellowship. It was put together by the Colorado District Attorney's Council, CDAC. At that time, there was application you can put in, and I put in an application, and it's actually it's like a lottery.
Oh, really?
You have your first picks, and then the DA's office have their first picks, and through that system, I was delegated to the 13th. That's how I ended up in the 13th Judicial District.
So you had no clue. You could have went to the Western Slope. You could have
knows?
went to southern Colorado somewhere.
Yeah, my first choice was Eagle,
Of course, that's everyone's first choice, dude.
but didn't get there. 13th picked me up.
What was the biggest difference so when you went to Logan County versus Boulder? Was there any big differences that you noticed?
Yeah, it actually, well, so you got to understand there's a huge divide between rural Colorado and metropolitan Colorado. And by metropolitan, I mean, the 18s, the Denver and Jefferson County. Those are even Adams.
The 720 and the 303.
Yeah, and you can consider Colorado Springs and Weld into those as well. Those are, big established metropolitan areas. And the hallmark of their DA's offices are they're highly structured. They're many times ran like a firm, right? And I don't think they're in need of talent. People apply there all the time, and they get to pick the ones they want. And the policies over there usually are very structured. But rural Colorado, based on my brief encountering with it, I was there for a year. A little bit under a year. The structure seems to be not as well parsed out as the metropolitan areas. Large part because there wasn't enough people to go out there. They don't have as big as a budget. The counties has less population, and the office generally had less people. Mind you, the 13th JD, the 13th Judicial District, actually covered a very large part of Colorado. A huge part of Colorado, starting from Morgan County all the way to Yuma, all the way to the northeastern tip.
So you got Morgan County, Logan County, Phillips County, Sedgwick County, Washington County.
Yeah.
And does that include Kit Carson?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It does. So that's a huge area. And I think at the time I was there, there's about 7 or 8 attorneys. And that's, I think, stretching it, covering those population. I myself, the first day I started, I started in Morgan County, and I was the only county court attorney for the county of Morgan County. And after that, I was transferred to Logan County and Washington County. And, I was the only county court attorney for Logan County and Washington County. That is, a very big docket. At the time, I think every year at the time, I had about 1,100 or 1,400 cases.
Which is a lot for the size of the population of those counties. Would you agree, or is it the correlation like per 100,000? Like what is?
I agree with you. I think that's a big chunk of the population there. And the observation was, I was day in and day out running a docket in those counties. The observation was, it's a very tragic observation, by the way. Many times we see the same people returning. It's the same second, I'd say 15, 20% of the population, 15% of the population just keeps coming back to court. Time and time again, coming back to court on domestic violence, on drug cases. It's very sad to see that. You see the similar faces.
Why do you think that is?
I'm not a social scientist, but I do like to think when I'm trying to find a reason for stuff. But I think it's I did pose this question to my elected DA at the time. Her name was Brittany Luton. She was the elected DA of the 13th when I was still there. I did ask her, I don't understand, why are these people coming back? Like, why don't they find a way to stay out of this system? It's not a pretty system by any stretch of the imagination. I'm sure all of you know. Why don't they, and we're giving them the tools through deferred sentences, through probation, why aren't they just, why do they keep coming back? Well, the answer she gave me at the time was they were brought up this way. That's all they know how to live. So you got to understand, with these people, they usually had a very tragic childhood growing up. Their parents usually are drug addicts, or they usually are, domestic violent domestic violence victims of each other. And if they're not lucky, the kids usually gets neglected when they were growing up. That's all they knew. They saw that growing up. That's what they, imitate. That's their environment. It really is very sad. And you have the same segment of the population that just keeps going through that cycle, time and time again.
Did you? I'm sorry. Did you ever rotate into like a rural town where they only had court once a week and have to stand in to do that?
That's Washington County. I think Washington County's docket was, was every 2 weeks, something like that. It's not as big as Logan County.
So back to what you were saying. What if you had, just your best guess? Obviously we're not social scientists. How would you break the cycle? What would you as a prosecutor in a prosecutor's mind?
Yes.
How would you break the cycle?
So, from a prosecutor's mind, when I was a prosecutor, there's a couple ways you should look at it, right? First of all, you look at it from the victim's perspective. Because, the victim suffers some specific harm, that's going to produce an impact on the victim herself or himself and the victim's family, right? So at least I try to make sure the victim knows that they're taken care of, that, there is still a semblance of progress and justice and structure, at least in a bigger societal circle, maybe not in their lives, but as a society, we still had structure. And that's something that he or she can rely on. And that's something that his or her kid can rely on, to institute that sense of, if you screw up, that's fine because, something or someone still have the structure to take care of this whole thing. That's number one. Number two, looking at it from the defendant's perspective, Ugen Sering was as well. By the way, Ugen Sering is my law partner. We came from the same DA's office. He took my, after I left, he went to work at the same spot. He was also Logan in Washington. So Ugen Sering and I, we do have to believe that, we do believe in restorative justice. We do believe that I don't think a criminal record is beneficial for anybody, especially in this society, in this job market. It's very hard. It's very hard,
especially out there.
Yeah, for someone to find a job, to grow meaningfully, develop professionally with a criminal record. So I really don't think that helps in a way. And the way our society is choose that, it shouldn't. That I think is one place where we think, I think we should look into how do we look at people who has records. I do tend to find ways where the person can take a class, perhaps, participate in the community, perhaps, try to write an essay and tell, be reflective of him or herself as to what happened or didn't, what's the better decision. I tried to work with them on low-level offenses.
Because you were still in county.
Yeah, but once you're into district court where you're looking at serious violence or serious drug crimes or serious sex crimes, that's a different beast.
So,
good.
I'm sorry, Mike.
Well, I was just going to ask him, we've long advocated on the show prior, even on the radio, that we believe the people with DURs should be given the opportunity to go to driving school and earn their driver's license back instead of it just compoundingly getting suspended from 2 to 4 years, 8 years, 12 years. You may never get your driver's license back, and you're just trying to go to work.
I have no idea why. I do have some idea. It's voted law, right? But I don't see the value in DUR traffic offenses like that being.
What about the guy that's had multiple DUIs, multiple DURs, that doesn't carry auto insurance, that does a hit and run? I mean, there's a victim for the person that got their car smashed. So, like, when you see people, like, because you were saying that these same people, we see the same faces coming into this courthouse. I mean, there's only so much people they want to have the ambition to help themselves, So, class, like, that's all I'm going to get. Do you feel like some of those people where it's like, hey, this is a slap on the wrist, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, I'm above the law type deal? Because that's kind of where I was going with this. Obviously first time offense, you write an essay to the judge, this is what should have been done. You do your little probation, a little community service, like, great.
Yeah.
But the person that just keeps coming back, what would you recommend for that? Because, I mean, you saw that over in the 13th Judicial District. I mean, what would you like to see as a prosecutor?
So I guess the reason, what I can look at in that circumstance is, why is he coming back time and time again? Is it that he wants to just keep doing crime? Is it what he wants? Is he finding liberation at the expense of his common folks? If that's the case, that's a different scenario. But if it's circumstance driven, if something like, there's no way he could have complied with something because his family is doing some weird stuff, or if there's unforeseen circumstances that he tried his best to be able to help. For example, I had this case that this is a very memorable case for me. So there was a lady. She had a number of domestic violence charges. Of course, there was a protection order against her. The protected party is the ex-boyfriend, right? Now, mind you, this was during a snowstorm, and then the next day to the snowstorm, she came back to court. She was charged with a violation of protection order, and the nature of the allegation was that she was found in the shed behind her boyfriend's house. She was brought to court, and I asked her, what's going on? Why are you there? You have a protection order. I've seen you many times already. Of course, the public defender was there too, we were talking about this. Her answer was, I didn't have anywhere to go. I don't have a home. It's freezing outside. I have nowhere to go. If I stayed outside of that shed, I was going to froze to death. Please take me to jail. There's tragedies like that, and there are many of them.
Well, each case is different.
I agree with you.
Sure, like that's the thing, something like that. It's like, okay, that's a very sad story, and like we don't want anyone to die, or anything like that. But they put themselves in a trap, where you just keep going. Like, it's almost like the courts are enabling them. Like, hey, like, this is nothing. Don't worry about it, And obviously, she wasn't committing a violent crime there. She violated a protection order, but the police were called for a reason initially, right?
Yeah.
So, that's what I'm like.
Well, there's some folks that I feel like abuse the PR bond system. And that's the folks that I see in the courtroom every 3 to 4 weeks, theft. There's a lot of theft going on, and I see a lot of judges the first time, all right, we'll give you a PR bond, and then the second time, and then the third or fourth time, they don't care. They keep continuing. That's when I think it's. When do you think it's time to set a cash or surety bail, or to start arguing it?
So, looking at it through the pure legal perspective, I've wrote many motions just to get people who are on warrant to get a PR bond. Many times they were charged with felonies. So what I always, the elements, the factors at least, a judge is looking at or should be looking at insofar as setting a bond, be it cash and surety bond or a PR bond, is two things, primarily. The level, if the person is a flight risk or not, or if the person is going to present a danger to the community, all right? So in the perfect world, a bond is to secure the person, making sure that the person comes back to court, and then making sure that the person knows that he or she cannot go on a crime havoc trip, so that if he or she does that, the bond money will be forfeited. It's an incentive for the person to come back to court, and for the person to not do crime while he or she is out on bond, right? And the Constitution actually protects one's right for a pretrial release. Constitution actually, protects one's right to a bond, precisely because if one is able to post a bond, that person ideally should be incentivized to come back to court and not do crime while able to prepare his own defense. Because there is a tremendous value in our right to defend ourselves in a criminal allegation circumstance. And I thoroughly believe that's one of the most fundamental rights that makes us, sets us apart in terms of our legal tradition. So those are two my primary purposes of a bond. So your question was, when should someone be placed on cash and surety bond, right?
If they've already had a PR and the
Right.
crime spree continues.
So
and
in a perfect world, a judge should consider the flight risk as well as if the person is a danger to the community. The judge should consider that and reach an individual decision and impose only the restrictions on liberty that's necessary, because that's what the statute says. The law says you should use the least restrictive means to make sure that you control his flight risk and you make sure he does not become a danger to the community. That's what the law says. So ideally, in an ideal world, that's what legislation wants. That's what the people want. It's a case-by-case evaluation of if the person is a flight risk or if a person can pose a danger to the community.
Do you think the judges and magistrates out there in the 13th did an adequate job as far as determining that?
I don't want to, specifically say anything about a judicial district, right? Because it was a very long time ago since I was there. People rotate out, people change. I don't know anymore. Okay?
But no, as your time
But
there.
Let me go broader than that. I did. I'm still a defense attorney. I travel across all the different courts, and I sit there and observe them, right? So I think in practice, I don't think the judges have their own agendas, and they run their docket a way that they want to run it as. And the public defenders, they have their agenda, and the DAs, they have their agenda, right? So I think somewhere in there are times where the statutory interpretation is lost through translation. The judge can say it's my policy that this gets set for that. The PD can say every case is a PR bond, and the DA can say every case is a cash and surety bond. I think the right thing, at least for because I'm a textualist. I look at the statute and I follow the statute, and the statute says it's a case-by-case analysis, and that's what I argue. I spend the time to study the case, and I spend the time arguing why the person is or is not a flight risk, why the person is or is not a danger to the community. But judges have their own prerogatives, and that's different across the board.
So if they're not a danger to society, and there's no danger of flight risk, but they continually miss court and they bog down the system.
That's a flight risk.
And, well, a lot of judges argue that it's not, because they don't leave the community. But they just don't go to court. But they cause the taxpayers money over and over again by not showing up for court. When is enough enough?
And then I want to add on to that too. What's a danger? Define what a danger to society is. Is shoplifting a danger to society? The person that runs their local convenience store, and if it gets stolen and all this crime happens there, maybe people don't want to go there anymore, which shuts down the business, which loses jobs. Because out there in the 13th Judicial District, those rural counties, they need all the jobs they can get.
That's
so.
Very
I mean,
true.
You could dive deep into that as well. But
there's a lot of mom and pop shops out there that aren't like Walmart or big conglomerates.
Well, there's a huge Walmart in there.
Well, that's the biggest employer in Sterling.
Yeah.
But all the other places, small town place, someone that's trying to run a tire shop or something, and they lose half their inventory. And
so the question was, how do you decide if it's a danger to the community or a flight risk?
Or
right?
when's enough enough?
And here's the answer to that. We got to understand that America is an adversarial system. Okay, we're not a inquisitive system. We're not like the Spain. They go in there and they're like, oh, I'm a judge. You're helping me find fact, right? In America, lawyers are not helping the judge finding facts. Lawyers are presenting their best facts against each other. And we as a community, we believe that that's how truths come out. Both parties present their cases and made a better one at Wing. Now that's very different from an inquisitive system like China, right? Where I came from. China is, I am a judge, lawyer. Your job is, you're supposed to find facts to me, and if I want investigation, I'll order the cops to the investigation. I'll dig everything up, and then I'll reach a decision, right? I personally, I agree with the adversarial system because that's less chance for a improper arbiter with self-interest to decide things the way they are. That opens the possibility for dictatorship. That opens the possibility for arbitrary practice of authority, like China. They have the right, they have the ability to just frame someone if they want.
Yeah.
In America, that's not what we believe in. We believe in that you present your facts, they present their facts, and you fight it out. And the truth, we believe, is somewhere that's going to come out in the middle. That's what we believe. So when you're asking me, what's danger to the community? What's flight risk? Those are precisely the things I think defense counsels and prosecutors and the judges, they need to litigate, right? The prosecutors should present their best case scenario as to why a certain set of facts fulfill the requirement of fulfill the factor of a danger to the community, and defense attorneys should present the best scenarios whereby that is not a danger to the community, and a judge ideally, after being thoroughly apprised of the law, the cases, and the facts and arguments, makes a ruling as to whether one case is or is not, because that is the most comprehensively informed decision.
So I have a two-part question for you.
Yeah.
We have a unique situation here. You have two hats. You've
Yeah.
been a prosecuting attorney as well as a defense attorney.
It's, a lot of defense attorneys come from prosecutors' offices. Yeah.
So the one good thing about it is you sound passionate about both, so I got a two-part question for
Sure.
you. Putting on your prosecuting hat first,
Yeah.
what crimes are victimless crimes? And then answer it as a defense attorney. Because it's long argued by legislators that
The
the
answer to
majority
that.
the majority are victimless crimes.
Yeah. So a lot of cases I do are vice cases, okay? And a lot of those are prostitution cases. Some people may argue that prostitutions are victimless crimes. But of course, there's people that argue that that is a victim. There's a victim in those crimes, and the society gets, bad moral character or whatever. But some people would argue that prostitutions are victimless crimes. And, I think DA's offices and police officers, sometimes they don't treat prostitution crimes as seriously as they would treat if it's an unlawful sexual contact. Those are vastly different crimes. And yeah, so if I have to think, the question is what might be a victimless crime. Some people may say prostitution is. Some people may say driving under restraint, so long as it's not alcohol related. It's just an administrative ticket. That may be a victimless crime, but that, Alec rightfully pointed out, there are people who doesn't want to get registered and they crash into folks and they create all sorts of havoc too. So
What about failure to register?
that is a
You
very
didn't-
good question.
No one got hit in the face. No one got their knee kicked in.
So
you didn't register.
that's
You
a
didn't-
very complex area of law, and the interest behind it is very intricate. So we do all recognize that there is a very valid interest in having dangerous people, insofar as their sexual tendencies. We need to have them registered. I think that's settled law, right? How far does that law carry? I think that's an area that's very highly contentious.
So the elephant in the room is auto theft. Because ever since they devalued auto theft and said it was a victimless crime and even put a dollar amount on the auto to be stolen, now we're number one per capita in the entire United States.
See, I don't think auto theft is victimless. If you steal my car, I'm the victim.
Yeah.
You know,
But it wasn't. But you didn't get harmed physically. But you have to go to court, right?
yeah.
You have a reputation to hold with your clients. I mean, if you were supposed to be at court at 8:30, you walk out at 8 o'clock to get to your vehicle. I mean, you're pretty close to the Denver court, so you could run. But I mean, how foolish would you look to your client? I mean, obviously they would understand, but I mean, there's that, and then you have to pay for a rental, or then you find your car, and it's just thrashed. It's your brand new car.
Yeah. So I think auto theft is a victim crime, but there's always a victim to a crime, right? But VRA, Colorado's Victim Rights Act, only covers a certain amount of crimes as victim rights crimes too. So if you want a statutory answer to that.
Yeah, and we understand that part, but what we're having a hard time grasping, putting our thoughts around is how did it get to this point when they decided that the low-level cars, the ones that have not the same value, under 20,000, those are the ones that are considered low-level offenses, and the higher cars, the ones 20,000 and higher, those are the ones that are considered a more, I guess, a more stern,
A jailable offense?
yes. When those people are probably the ones that could buy another car or even get a rental, and the ones that have the cheaper car may be living paycheck to paycheck and couldn't afford to buy another car.
Well, that's legislation, so that's why you vote, folks.
Yeah.
You vote to voice your opinions about law, and then if the majority agrees on a certain thing, then that is to be made into law, and at least that's the hope of our democracy, is what we think we are.
Yeah. So that's what I was trying to get at. And as a prosecutor, you see it one way, but as a defense attorney, how do you see it?
So as a citizen of the United States, again, as I said, I think I'm somewhat of a textualist. I follow the law. I think bad things happen if you see the law and try to go around arguing discretion on a settled law. I think bad things would happen because ideally, in our society, a piece of law is what people's will are. All right? And looking at that, I would ideally think that is, represents the best interest of our community. And I follow that. If you're trying to say to me that this law shouldn't apply, or it should apply one way or another way, or change the law even, and that's a problem for me, because I want to make sure that I know what the legislative interests are, I know what the people are voted for, and that's the law. All right. Now you're saying the question you asked was how do I look at it from a defense attorney perspective? On a defense side of it, first of all, different crimes have different elements, right? So, for example, if you're charged with, if the prosecutor wants to prove that you sped, have to prove that it was you in the state of Colorado driving a vehicle over a specific speed limit, right? So, it's the prosecution's burden to prove each and one single of those things in front of the juror, right? Again, it's a discourse, and I think a good defense attorney's job was to make sure that the jurors ask the right questions within themselves or to the judge as to how and if the evidence is sufficient to support the elements. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So how I look at it from a defense perspective is I question everything. I look at the elements and I look at the evidence. I ask myself, do I think the elements are met by the evidence? If so, how? If not, how? And if there's issues with the evidence, then I'll look into the evidence and think, hey, maybe this doesn't meet it. Maybe that, what's the different? What could have happened there? What could have happened there? Essentially, I think this process is about finding reality, but then we as human beings, we recognize it's very difficult for us to know exactly what happened. We cannot know, what exactly happened even 10 minutes ago. And that's why I think we have the rule of evidence. We bring evidence in, and we try to, apprise of its accuracy, and then we base our decisions on that, right? So I think as a defense attorney, we're trained to see multiple versions of the same fact. Maybe they're true. Who knows? Reality is a very abstract construct. So,
And the ultimate goal is just to win your case, one way or one hat or the other.
my goal is to zealously represent my client.
Yeah.
If that brings me to winning a case, then we'll win the case. On the other hand, as you know, there is the whole plea negotiation area of law too, right? In fact, 95% of the cases in the United States are pled out. So every case will become a economical decision. Do you want to keep pursuing perhaps a acquittal, or do you want to, take the plea, or do you want to try it if you qualify for a public defender? That's a highly case-by-case evaluation. Yeah.
I got one more question before we close out.
Sure.
As a defense attorney,
Yeah.
do you think a monetary bail is reasonable in the judicial system for some cases? Not all cases, just for some cases. Do you believe that it's necessary to have in the judicial system?
First of all, it's statutory, right? It's statutory. It's listed in the United States Constitution and Colorado Constitution. People have a right to bail, and many times that is a cash and surety bail. Do I think it's necessary? I'm gonna take off my lawyer hats. I'm not speaking as a defense attorney or a ex-prosecutor. As a common citizen, as a member of the community, I think there's a value in making sure the flight risks does not run away and the danger to the community do not go out on the street and shoot a number of folks. I think there's a tremendous value in that. I think cash and surety bonds are in a very unique position where that's what we as a community reached as the solution for that. I think for that matter, I believe in them being statutory, and believe in them sometimes being necessary. I agree with that. But that's me as a person.
Yeah, that's all we're asking for, is you as a person. Why don't you tell the viewers where they can find you online, how they can contact you, what law that you guys do, and let them know.
Oh, sure, yeah. So our firm's name is Britt, Searing, and Wang. It's constituted of three partners. Myself, I'm one, and then we have again Searing, who is also an ex-prosecutor, and we have Andrew Britt, who is a very seasoned civil litigator. We're litigators, so we do a variety of litigations. We bring suits, we defend suits, and we do criminal defense as well, just because we were very seasoned prosecutors as well. You can find me, you can call me, 720-998-5039. It's my number, 720-998-5039. You can also email me, ywang@btwlegal.com. That's ywang@btwlegal.com. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on our show. I appreciate you coming on. I hope we could have you on again.
Well, thank you very much. It was a blast.
Said I'm about to clean it up, I'm about to roll it up.